Russia had about 600 tons of gold, and today they have 2,300 tons. China had about 600 tons of gold, and today they have about 2,000 tons, just slightly less, that we know of. And they may have several thousand tons off the books in the State Administration of Foreign Exchange that we don't know about because that's completely opaque. So Russia and China did exactly what we warned the Pentagon about in 2009, exactly, which is increase their gold reserves by a factor of 4 or more. When you talk about reserve currency, you have to understand what that means. It's not like the People's Bank of China has a bunch of $100 bills on pallets stacked up in the basement. When people say reserve currency, what they really mean is the currency of the bonds that they invest in. In other words, they're dollar-denominated assets in the form of treasury bonds or notes. That's what China actually has on their books, not like the dollars per se. What I was hypothesizing then, and I'd come back to this, is you can create a brand new currency that does have all that stuff. And in my example, they used a Swiss bank, UK law, put the gold in a third-party depository. If you wanted some of the new currency, you could deposit your own gold and get some of the currency or trade with them or run a surplus. So it was a replacement system, but you would need the gold to instill confidence. But they don't have bond markets, and they're not going to have them soon. So the yuan and the ruble aren't going to replace anything. Well, the repercussions may be felt for 10 years or longer, but the immediate impact is going to go well beyond the so-called sanctions. What the point I was really making was we're slapping sanctions on Russia. Russia is hitting back with some retaliatory actions, and it's pretty easy to look at the direct impact of that, but there's second order and third order effects that will pop up all over the world and could very quickly get out of control. Think of it as the economic equivalent of a nuclear war. Nobody wants a nuclear war. But the one thing they all said in common, the one thing they all shared was don't go there. And what they meant was that nobody wakes up and says, oh, gee, I think I'll start a nuclear war today. What a good idea. That never happens. What does happen is you get into an escalatory situation, back and forth, where you're escalating and escalating, and you end up in a nuclear war. You never intended it, never started out that way, but you end up there through escalation. Now take that, and that is good analysis, take that and apply it to what is now, I would say, the first full-scale economic war, sanctions war. We've had sanctions, for a long time, and we go back to at least the 70s with Iran, but even before that, FDR put sanctions on Japan. Nothing on this scale. This is unprecedented in its scope and application. And my only point is the effects of this are going to not just last a long time, yes, but they're going to pop up in very, very unexpected places. Let me make the point. There was never a war that was easier to prevent. There's never been a war that's easier to prevent, and there's never been a war that's easier to end. You could end this war in 48 hours or less. Having said that, I did expect that through a series of policy blunders and escalation, in this case, military escalation and political escalation, and then later in the book, around on page 250 or so, I have a whole section on Ukraine, Russia, and natural gas. So this has been brewing for a long time. You can go back to the 2008 Bucharest Declaration, but if you want to pick one thing and say, hey, when did this thing take a turn for the worse?
Right. So
that we were on a path to war. That was the color revolution sponsored by Obama and Biden, which was a coup d'etat. The president of Ukraine at the time, he was pro-Russian, and Obama set out to depose him, and they did. And they put in Poroshenko, who was a U.S. puppet, and at the same time, like 2 months after the color revolution, 1 month before Poroshenko, Putin took Crimea. He said, okay, that's how you want to play, fine. You move away from neutrality, move towards NATO, I'll take Crimea, your move. And then there was nothing. Putin didn't take one square inch during the Trump administration, because Trump is highly unpredictable, but put Biden back in, who was part of the original Obama-Biden team. And so not only was Trump not in Putin's pocket, he was the only one who stood up to Putin in such a way that Putin didn't take one square inch of territory. He took Crimea under Obama. Now he's taking kind of half the country under Biden. Didn't take anything under Trump. So that completely debunks that. But just to take it one step further, who is in the pocket of the Ukrainians, at least? And the answer is Joe Biden, because of Hunter Biden, who made millions of dollars from Burisma, their large natural gas company. Ukraine is ranked in the low 90s of the most corrupt countries in the world. In other words, it's at the bottom on a corruption list with the most honest countries being on top. Ukraine is very close to the bottom. It's the most corrupt country in Europe, one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Zelensky's just another oligarch, just another phony. Now, you can take sides, but to me, Putin's a dictator, Zelensky's a dictator. Pick your dictator. But this idea that he's some good guy Democrat is nonsense. Well, it's a phone call, basically. I mean, Biden's kind of non-compos mentis, but somebody who can string a few sentences together needs to call Zelensky and say, here's what we're going to do. You're not going to join NATO. We'll get the NATO Secretary General, Jens Stoltenberg, to say that. You need to say it, and the U.S. will say it. So you're not going to join NATO. You're not going to join the EU. You can be independent in the sense of being autonomous, but you have to be neutral. When you've got two great powers, whether it's the U.S. and Russia or the U.S. plus Europe and Russia confronting each other, the idea of buffer states, I mean, that's as old as, maybe if not history, at least the history of buffer states is several centuries old at this point. It's a part of what every international strategist looks at. So Ukraine should be a buffer state. It should be neutral. That way Putin has no reason to invade, and we have no reason to try to push the borders of NATO to a point slightly east of Moscow, which Moscow hasn't been attacked from the east since Genghis Khan. These sanctions will not work to stop the war or slow the war or change the outcome of the war. Now, they absolutely punish the Russian economy. Yep. They punish Russian individuals, consumers, Russian citizens. They're going to have fewer options, more expensive goods. Their economy is going to slow down. Unemployment will go up. The ruble is devalued. All those things are true. But they're also true in the United States. We're going to punish Americans far worse than the Russians. We're already seeing, I took a long trip yesterday. I filled up my car with gas at the end of the trip. It was $76. Inflation's here. We all see it. Price of gasoline, eggs, milk, butter, groceries at the store, rents, electricity, home heating, fuel, you name it. Across the board, inflation's affecting everything. And it started really in mid-2021. So here we are, almost 2023. So it's been going on for well over a year. For the first 6 or 7 months, Jay Powell and, for that matter, Janet Yellen were like, yeah, we see it, but it's transitory. We know that story. Finally, November 2021, Jay Powell threw in the towel, said, okay, time to retire the word transitory. Now let's get to work. And they started raising interest rates in March 2022. And we're now up to Fed funds rate of 4%. They're going to raise them again in December 14th by another 50 basis points. We kind of, still a little bit away from that, but we know it's coming. The Fed, this is the no drama Fed. They tell you what they're doing in advance. So I always say you don't need a crystal ball to figure out the Fed. You just need to listen to what they're saying and believe them. So they're going to do 50 basis points in December. That'll get the policy rate of the Fed funds target rate to 4.5%. But that's from zero. March 1st, it was zero. So to go from 0 to 4.5 in less than 9 months, about 8.5 months, that's amazing. We haven't seen anything like that since Paul Volcker in the early 80s. Now, I know rates are not 13, 14%, but to go from 0 to 4.5, I can say in 8 months is a shock. Now, why is the Fed doing this? Well, they say they want to kill inflation. Okay, but there are two sources of inflation. Inflation can come from the supply side, what's called cost push inflation. Costs go up and they get pushed into retail prices and consumer prices, and that is what's happening. That's because of the supply chain breakdown, energy prices, shortages of goods, et cetera. So that's cost push inflation from the supply side. There's another kind of inflation that comes from the demand side. And this is much more psychological. It's when consumers say, they just have it in their heads, and maybe from objective data, that prices are going up. And so they change their behavior. They say, I was thinking of getting a new washing machine, but I was going to wait 6 months, but I better buy it now because the price is going to be a lot higher in 6 months. Or a car, suit of clothes, a dress, furniture, whatever it is, better buy it now because the price is going to go up. That demand side inflation is called demand pull. You're basically pulling demand forward because of in anticipation of much higher prices.